Madam President, I request unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Madam President, it is an incredible honor to represent Montana in the United States Senate. More than 150 years ago, a young Norwegian woman named Karin Dyrud immigrated to this country. She came in search of freedom and opportunity. She came to a nation where government served the people and not the other way around. After her husband passed away, this tough widow and mother of 7 headed west to Montana and settled with her children about an hour north of Great Falls. Karin Dyrud was my great-great-grandmother and the beginning of my Montana story. Her perseverance is the reason why my family has called Montana home for 5 generations. It's why Cindy and I have been able to pass along a legacy of faith, of freedom, of personal responsibility to our 4 children. We are blessed to live in the greatest nation on the earth. And it is a solemn responsibility of the United States Senate to do everything in its power to keep it that way. Before I was elected to Congress, I spent 28 years in the private sector, growing companies and creating jobs. In fact, I'm the only chemical engineer in Congress. And in the private sector, we understand the importance of hard work, of innovation, of accountability, and not spending more than you take in. The freedom of ideas and trade, private property and opportunity are the fundamental elements of liberty and of prosperity. And these are the elements that helped Right Now Technologies, a Montana-based cloud computing business that I served as vice president in for 12 years, where we grew from a small startup into a publicly traded company and a global leader in cloud computing. We created over 1,000 high-paying jobs, jobs that support a vibrant community with good schools and a quality of life for Montana families. Unfortunately, Washington, D.C., under the guise of equality, is encroaching upon these freedoms, replacing the constitutional rule of law through elected officials with bureaucratic rule that is unaccountable, inefficient, ineffective, and far too costly. Washington is more concerned with its own self-interest and self-gain than the well-being of the American people. As we begin consideration of the federal budget this week, we must hold government accountable to the people. Last year, the New York Times did an assessment of the health and wealth of every county in the nation. And you might expect folks in Silicon Valley to be doing fairly well, or perhaps the suburbs of New York City. What shocked me was seeing that 6 of the nation's top 10 wealthiest counties surround Washington, D.C. And that sends a pretty clear message about where Washington's priorities are. During the recession, while millions of Americans were struggling to make ends meet amidst layoffs and economic instability, Washington, D.C. thrived. The federal government poured millions of dollars into new buildings, and salaries kept growing and growing. It's time for Washington to be held accountable to the American people. And that's why the first bill I introduced into the United States Senate was the Balanced Budget Accountability Act. It simply requires Congress to balance the budget or members won't get paid. It's not that complicated. It's easy to measure. It's very simple. No balanced budget, no paycheck. Washington is out of touch with the day-to-day struggles that American farmers and ranchers, union workers, and tribal members face every day. And look no further than President Obama's recent veto of the Keystone XL pipeline. Instead of working towards North American energy independence, President Obama continues to play politics with good-paying American jobs. Instead of advancing economic opportunity for hard-working Montana families, President Obama is instead perpetuating his war on energy and standing in the way of affordable made-in-Montana and made-in-America energy. While serving in the House, I invited Crow Tribal member Chairman Darren Old Coyote to testify before the Natural Resources Committee. And the Crow Reservation in Montana is home to some of the richest energy reserves in our country. But the president's senseless agenda is preventing them from developing their resources. And what Chairman Old Coyote said has stuck with me. He said this: "A war on coal is a war on the Crow people." President Obama and the EPA's regulatory overreach is a direct threat to thousands of jobs and our nation's economic future. And we shouldn't be hitting pause on American energy production. We need to encourage it. More Made in America energy doesn't just mean more money in the pockets of hardworking families. It also means more jobs. It means energy independence. Our energy security, though, isn't just about jobs and low energy prices. It's tied directly to our national security. I'm happy to report the U.S. will become the world's largest oil and gas producer in the world this year, surpassing both Russia and Saudi Arabia. As we see the growing threat of ISIS and a nuclear Iran, one thing is clear: we need more Made in America energy, not more made in the Middle East oil. Because we have tremendous opportunities to develop our nation's energy resources and create new jobs across the entire nation. But we must allow the states to take the lead. Because rather than moving forward with common sense job-creating solutions like the Keystone Pipeline, Washington continues to put barrier after barrier up that prevents job creation and the responsible management of our resources. And we see that in our national forests and our public lands. Our public lands out west are a tremendous asset to our tourism economy and our way of life. It's one of the reasons that many people come to Montana in the first place. But the federal government's perpetual failure to properly manage our national forests has led many of Montana's forested counties into economic despair. Like many western states, we once boasted a robust timber industry. Now timber harvests on our national forests have declined 82%. In fact, I had dinner one evening with a couple from Eureka, Montana, up in the northwest corner of our state in Lincoln County. And they said, "Steve, basically we describe this area now as poverty with a view." We must implement meaningful forest management reforms that get our timber industry up and running again. It improves the health of our forests and ensures our rural counties aren't dependent on the whims of the federal government's annual budget. But we must ensure the states have primacy in these decisions. We must ensure that the hardworking farmers, the ranchers, the loggers, the sportsmen who live, work, and recreate on these lands every day have their voices heard. And that those closest to the land are guiding management practices, not bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., or lawyers in San Francisco that would be hard-pressed to find Montana on a map. But Washington's overreach doesn't just affect our natural resources. We're seeing it in our technology sector and the internet. I worked in the technology sector for more than 12 years. I know firsthand how the internet has removed geography as a constraint for countless businesses in Montana and across our nation. I know that technology has created jobs and economic opportunities in communities where little previously existed. We must encourage the growth of these high-tech jobs in Montana and across our country. They're good-paying jobs that will help us grow economically, and they're going to allow us to remain globally competitive. Because the internet is a laboratory of innovation. Yet DC wants to tie our entrepreneurs' hands by placing more regulations on the internet. The FCC recently approved a 300-plus page plan to regulate Americans' internet access as a Title II utility. In short, a government takeover of the internet. That's like putting a buggy whip manufacturer in charge of Tesla. The internet is unconstrained innovation. And that's why I'll stand strong against DC's attempts to tax the internet, to regulate the internet, and stifle innovation. If we want to remain the greatest nation in the world, we need to remain globally competitive. And technology plays a key role in that. But we also must implement meaningful tax reforms that encourage American businesses, incentivize American businesses to grow and create jobs here at home, not overseas. During my time at our software company, the last 5 years, I managed Asia Pacific. I had offices in Tokyo, in Sydney, but headquartered in Bozeman, Montana, as we were growing and competing against some of the world's best technology companies. And we must expand our trade opportunities, certainly for our farmers and ranchers across our country. So it's important that innovation and entrepreneurship is encouraged, not hindered. But unfortunately, Washington, D.C. is more interested in issuing press releases and headlines and getting results. And as an engineer, I was trained to solve problems. Find solutions, get results. And it's time for Washington to look to the states for these solutions, to adhere to the principles of federalism and states' rights as clearly found in our Constitution, empowering local communities, state legislatures, governors, tribes to manage their resources, to grow economic opportunity, and define and determine their own destiny. In fact, it's time for Washington to listen to the states. It's time for Washington, D.C. to listen to Montana. You know, I've always said that one of the best decisions I ever made in my life was when I picked my great-great-grandmother. She got our family out to Montana. And she's buried in a small country cemetery just east of a small town called Conrad, Montana. And on her headstone in this very remote small country cemetery reads 3 simple words: saved by grace. Because she placed her ultimate faith in her God, not in her government. It's an honor to stand here today on the U.S. Senate floor to serve as Montana's voice in Washington. I will continue working to bring more Montana solutions to Washington and get it working again for all Montanans. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Majority Leader.
Just wanted to congratulate our freshman colleague from Montana on his initial speech, and particularly second his observations about the devastation in the coal fields of America. We have a depression in the eastern part of my state as a direct result of this administration and the EPA, and I know it's affected the great state of Montana as well. And so among the many insightful observations of the Senator from Montana, I particularly appreciate his thoughts about energy.